All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Juneau Votes State Candidate Forum. My name is Andy Hirsch, and I work at your public library. And I'm also a part of Juneau Votes, which is a nonpartisan, collaborative community project with the goal of increasing voter registration, education, and turnout. I want to kick us off here tonight by talking about why we're here. I think our reason for being here can be summed up in one word, which is education. I believe that education is the biggest barrier we face in voting and being involved in civic life. When people choose not to vote, they often do so because they can't convince themselves that their vote matters or that they are well informed enough to make a good choice. Self-education is the answer to both of these dilemmas. If you don't believe your vote matters, I would encourage you to think about the ways in which our state government has an impact on you. From commerce to courts, to our schools, our natural resources, transportation, and healthcare, our state government has a significant impact on each and every one of us. If you need even more convincing that your vote matters, you need to look no further than the 3 people running for the Alaska House of Representatives this year. Each of them believes that your vote matters so much that they are offering up a huge amount of their time over the next 2 years or more. There's no glory in being had in being a state legislator. These folks are running because they know it matters. Self-education is also the answer to becoming well-informed enough to make a good choice. It isn't easy. Like most things, it takes effort. And we hope tonight's event makes it a little easier for you. You'll have the opportunity to hear our candidates questioned by local journalists, and at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of your own. If you have friends that couldn't make it here tonight, I encourage you to encourage them to listen in on KTOO next Thursday, October 20th at 7 p.m. when it will be broadcast. And we'll also be posting a video of the entire debate on KTOO and the Juneau Empire websites. We have 3 candidates here with us today. Sam Keto III is running unopposed for the as the Democratic candidate for District 33. This will be his 2nd term. Kathy Munoz is running as the Republican candidate for District 34, and she is running for her 5th term. Justin Parrish is running as the Democratic candidate for District 34, and he is running for his 1st term. Now, for the debate rules. Our goal is to be inclusive while also recognizing that there is only one competitive race this year. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. We will then move into a moderated debate format with our panelists, with questions primarily being asked of Ms. Munoz and Mr. Parrish. You will each have 1 minute to answer the question, and you will also have a 30-second rebuttal. If you wish, Mr. Keto, you will have 5 wild cards, which will allow you to weigh in on questions throughout the debate. At the end of the moderated debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we will then move into the audience Q&A at that time. So our panelists tonight are Matt Miller of KTOO Public Media and James Brooks of the Juneau Empire. Matt and James are both journalists and reporters for our community. Would you take it away?
Great, thank you, Andy. And just kind of a preface here, James and I are going to alternate asking questions. We're also going to alternate the first person that we're going to ask it to. So even though it's completely random, you may notice a little bit of a pattern throughout the night here. So starting with you, Mr. Parrish. Oh, that's right. Opening statements. Let's start with Mr. Keto. 2 minutes.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I am running for my 2nd full term. The reason that I stepped forward into 2014 to fulfill Beth Bertula's her seat when she left is really the same reason that I'm running today, and that is we have a fiscal situation in our state of Alaska. Back then, we were looking at declining production to the point where it seemed as though we could get to about mid-2020s before we started running out of money significantly. Shortly after I took the position, oil prices crashed, and we ended up in a situation where we were having to address the fiscal situation more immediately. We're doing that right now, and that's why I'm still committed to being here. What I want is a future for our kids, our grandkids, a future for the state of Alaska that allows people that live here to have the opportunity to live fulfilling lives, to get education that they need, to be Alaskans and enjoy being Alaskans. And we still have quite a long ways to go. We can get to a sustainable fiscal plan, but it's going to take the work of all of the legislature to do that, and that's why I'm still before you.
Thank you, Mr. Quito. Ms. Munoz.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the Juneau Empire and Juneau Votes and to KTOO, as well as the public. Thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful night. My name is Kathy Munoz. I grew up here in Juneau, lifelong resident of the community. I graduated from Juneau Douglas High School. I hold a bachelor's degree in political science. I have 2 children. Mercedes is here tonight. She's an artist and working at the Canvas. And my son Matthew is in 5th grade. I'm married to Juan. We are small business owners. We own the Ring Munoz Gallery and art publication business. I served 3 terms on the City and Borough of Juneau Assembly. I was elected to the Statehouse in 2008. I serve as the only member from Southeast on the Finance Committee. In that role, I'm very active in protecting Juneau jobs and promoting policies that encourage a diverse economy in fisheries, in mining, and in tourism. I work really hard to keep Juneau jobs, state jobs in the capital city. Whenever there's a rumor of a job moving, we're very active to turn that around and to prevent any kind of inadvertent job loss out of the community. I'm also very active in getting infrastructure work done for our community. Many wonderful projects in the downtown core area, the state capitol building, the Father Kashavara Library, Archives and Museum building, the infrastructure improvements to the Fish and Game building and the Labor building. All of those good projects anchor jobs in Juneau and help strengthen our state capital. I'm also very committed to a state fiscal plan. I supported the governor, SB 128. I was one of 5 in the House Finance that voted in favor of the plan. I'm committed to continuing to work to get Alaska on sound financial footing. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, and thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Parrish, please.
Thank you. Thank you, of course, to the media, to UAS, to the Aquan people, to Juneau Votes, and to the League of Women's Voters, and of course, thank you all for participating. Democracy isn't easy, but this is what makes it happen. Now, I'm Justin Parrish. I was born and raised here in town. I graduated from Juneau Douglas High School. I hold a degree from UAF and a degree from UAS, which would, by the way, make me the first UAS alumnus to be in the legislature if you elect me November 8th. My family's been in Alaska for 3 generations on all sides. My father's mother was born in Kluwak to the Dog Salmon clan. And so we are Alaskan, and our concern for the future of our community is profound. I look at the direction the state has gone, and I worry about my students. I worry about my nieces who are growing up here. I even worry about my parents who are here tonight and who've retired here. We need a balanced fiscal plan, yes. We need a legislature that works for us, and I haven't seen that with the current majority, which my opponent has upheld. We need practical solutions. We need moral solutions for Alaskans. Otherwise, the students with whom I work, whom I see go hungry, will continue to be sacrificed first at the same time as we get ourselves the better part of $1 billion into debt to oil companies. And that's absurd. And we cannot afford to continue with the current leadership. Thank you.
Now on to the questions. Mr. Parrish, starting with you on the Alaska Gas Pipeline Project, the front-end engineering and design, not the total cost, just the pre-feed, is expected to run as high as $2 billion. Would you be willing to vote next session for an initial appropriation that could run into the hundreds of millions of dollars as Governor Walker continues to push for the state to take over the project?
No. if private industry in a large way is saying, this isn't viable, we're not going to make money on this, I think we ought to listen to them. As much as I would love to see more Alaskan jobs, we need to make sure that we're spending the state's money wisely. I would rather see those jobs in Juneau rather than dumping however many billions of dollars into a project which may never bear economical fruit. That's where I'm coming down on this one. Because if you look at, say, 775 million, that's approximately, how many jobs is that? It's an awful lot of state jobs, and they're going to come disproportionately out of Juneau. Thank you.
Professor Rollins?
Thank you. The legislature has supported a market-driven approach for a gas line as a means to tap the vast resources of gas on the North Slope. The issue now is that we're moving away from a market-driven approach. The state no longer is a 25% shareholder, but a 100% shareholder in this new project. And I have serious concerns, and I would be a no vote at this point.
Thank you to both of you. Representative Munoz, you'll have this first question. Earlier this year, the Empire published a pair of letters you submitted to Alaska courts, and those letters had asked the courts to reconsider the sentences of 2 people convicted of crimes against children. Have you since reconsidered those letters, and how have your plans for the future changed as a result?
So I have acknowledged that I made a mistake. I've publicly apologized to the community and to the victims, and actually have taken this very powerful learning experience and turned it into a positive, reaching out to individuals that are on the front lines working with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And I'm working with a number of individuals, and including Dr. Brown here in Juneau, on legislation, on ideas for legislation to address gaps in service in our foster care system, in our healthcare system, and also in our criminal justice system. Thank you.
And Mr. Parrish, slightly different version of the question for you. Is it ever appropriate for a legislator, even one who has personal knowledge that may not have been admitted in court, to write a letter and up that sky?
It's a heartbreaking issue. Our state has 6 times the average for child sexual abuse. And I think that any time that a public official comes out publicly to defend perpetrators, to promote the culture of silence and support for perpetrators, it sends a very clear message to all the victims in the state, all the survivors in the state, and to people who may become perpetrators in the future. I think it is, well, to take a quick step to the side, I also believe in the separation of the powers. I do not think that a legislator, particularly one sitting on the committee which oversees court finances, should say to a court what they need to do or what they ought to do.
Mr. Parrish, sponsors of Alaska's Safe Children's Act, otherwise known as Aaron's Law, say more work still needs to be done to establish a support program for children who are victims of violence and sexual assault. And even though Alaska faces a monumental fiscal gap, would you be willing to commit to helping the bill sponsors, or new bill sponsors, who may be your political opposite, and devoting any necessary state funding for the project?
Absolutely. We have a profound moral obligation to the innocence of our state, to the children of our state, and honestly, it makes really good economic sense to spend on an ounce of prevention and avoid a pound of cure. So yes, I will support any legislation, I will support any movement which I believe will promote the welfare of Alaska's children.
Thank you. As a prime co-sponsor of that legislation, I am very much in favor of getting curriculum into the schools that teaches prevention and addresses the very high rates of domestic violence and sexual assault in our state. Bree's Law and Aaron's Law will come into place in the next school year, and it's going to have a profound impact, I think, positive impact on the very high rates of domestic violence and sexual assault in our state.
And Mr. Tito?
Well, I'll use my first wild card on this one, and I think I'll just wait. I do strongly support, was a co-sponsor of the legislation. There are issues that will need to be addressed in that legislation coming forward to this year, some items that will be taking effect that we need to watch for. But one of the critical items we need to work on is making sure that with the passage of SB 91 and making sure getting improvements to our criminal justice system, we take savings from that and we put it into programs that are going to benefit victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. So we anticipate savings. Let's use that savings to the positive.
And for all of our panelists, if you do want to rebut something someone has said, please just signal us and we'll stop what we're doing and give you a chance to speak. Our next question here deals with Governor Walker's recent permanent fund veto. Ms. Munoz, you'll have the first chance to answer this. What's your position on this veto that basically cut dividends in half down to $1,000 and $1,022? And do you think that the challenges to that veto, the lawsuit or the bills that have been proposed to restore the dividend to its full value are appropriate?
Okay, first of all, I supported SB 128, which would have set the dividend at $1,500 and tied it to continued growth of the corpus of the fund. That legislation, as you know, did not make it through. It was the cornerstone of the governor's fiscal plan. The veto is would veto approximately $650 million from the dividend this year. That money remains in the earnings reserve account and is available to future dividends, or gives us more flexibility in our cash reserves going forward. In answer to your question, if it's part of a broader fiscal plan, restoring this year's dividend is a possibility, but I think it was wise to keep as many of our financial resources intact as possible going forward.
So just to clarify, you don't support the lawsuit seeking to override the veto?
No, I do not. No.
Thank you. Mr. Parrish?
My impression on the governor's veto of half of our permanent funds was that it was an act of desperation. He doesn't have the power to pass revenue-raising measures by fiat. He's only got the red pen. So he removed the most unpopular roadblock for the legislature to come to a balanced fiscal solution. And he tried to shame them into action, and the legislative majority proved shameless. They allowed this to happen without taking any of the responsible ethical measures which must accompany such a move, such as asking non-residents to contribute something. That would be nice. Or reducing the hundreds of millions of dollars that we're planning on paying to oil companies in excess of our production tax revenues. We need a balanced solution.
So do you or do you not agree with the veto?
I do not agree with the veto as it stands. It needs to be part of a comprehensive, any reduction to the permanent fund must be part of a more comprehensive solution.
And what about the lawsuit seeking to overturn the veto?
As much as I hate to see state resources being gobbled up and ground away like this, especially in a time of austerity, I do believe that there is an important legal question to be resolved. So however it comes out, I leave that in the hands of the court.
Mr. Parrish, legislature essentially failed to act on Governor Walker's fiscal plan that he put forward that initially included reductions of oil and gas tax credits, a variety of new taxes, regular draws from the earnings of the permanent fund to supplement the state's operational budget. Would you support or oppose that plan if Governor Walker presents it again next session?
Much to the governor's credit, from the very beginning, he said that it was in pencil. The legislature was invited to make the modifications that would be necessary for them to accept it as part of a balanced plan. And they didn't. We need a balanced fiscal solution which will be sustainable for the state in the long term if this is going to be a decent place for our children to grow up and for us to grow old. And we're just not seeing that. We didn't see that for 2 years. 2 years we've been running $3 billion plus dollar deficits and no fiscal plan after 2 years, I don't think that we'll see a good resolution to this without a change in the leadership, and especially a change in the composition of the Finance Committee, frankly.
Can I respond to that? Again, excuse me, the governor's cornerstone legislation, SB 128, was voted, it passed the Senate. It came to the House, it was in House Finance. There were 5 of us that supported it, 6 did not, 2 Democrats, 4 Republicans. You know, that was a failure on 6 legislators not to vote in favor of moving that legislation. It was a key piece of the fiscal plan, and excuse me, it needed to go forward. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And then in terms of the oil and gas credits, the governor's oil and gas credit bill, HB 247, did pass the legislature. We did not get everything into the credit reform bill that we initially wanted in the House, but we made a significant step forward. We cut approximately $200 to $300 million in the credit program. We must come back and continue to revise and bring those costs down. But not to go with that compromise legislation would have set us back at ground zero with the credit program.
Mr. Parrish, you wanted to say?
If I may. The compromise legislation, what happened was we had House Bill 247. It got sent to the Senate, it was gutted, it was sent back with a 3 times higher burden for the state. That's a 3 times higher burden for us, according to the governor's Department of Taxation. And that's really not okay. And what got us into this situation in the first place was legislation that my opponent voted for at every step of the way. So yes, we need a change in the way the permanent fund is structured to be as part of the problem, but we have to fix the tax credits. Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
Excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. The credit program has been on the books for 20 plus years. It's not a function of SB 21 solely. It goes back to the ELF and to PPT and to ACEs. And so the credit program, though, essentially works like this. You generally take 20% of an investment and apply it toward a tax liability, or the company can sell that liability to another company. But what's happened is we have gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of investment on the North Slope as a result. Kalis just recently, a company, an independent company, and this is the type of company we've been trying to attract, has just announced a 200,000 barrel a day find. Repsol and Armstrong, 2 independents, have also announced major fines. Those fines would not have been possible without the credit program. We did reduce credits substantially. We eliminated all of the credits in the Cook Inlet, and that's where the problem really was. We were paying hundreds of millions of dollars in credits to companies that had no tax liability. That had to end, and it did end with the compromise legislation.
Thank you. We've talked about SB 128 a few times here, but the issue still remains out there. Would you favor or oppose a statewide sales tax as a solution to, or a partial solution to, the state's fiscal circumstances? Ms. Munoz?
A sales tax,
Yes.
statewide. We do need a broad-based tax to be phased in. I'm not sure that a sales tax is the right approach, though, because it disproportionately harms communities that already have municipal taxes, such as Juneau and other coastal communities around the state.
And Mr. Parrish?
I'm really glad to say that we actually see eye to eye on this one. A state sales tax would put the burden of collecting the funds on municipalities, so that's a large administrative overhead. It would disproportionately harm rural communities where they're paying more for necessities and heck, even luxuries. It's not the most just solution. I think that we should be looking very carefully at how we can draw in more of the tourism dollar. However, I don't think a state sales tax is the right solution right now.
Mr. Parrish, what's your position on Governor Walker's original proposal to introduce an income tax of 6% of the federal income tax?
I think it's necessary. No one likes taxes, right? But if we want to keep our property value, if we want to keep our neighbors employed, if we want to keep on enjoying the services and the high quality of life that we have enjoyed, we're going to have to start stepping up, taking responsibility. And again, I'm glad to say that my opponent and I see eye to eye on this. Let's see. An important note is that for the higher levels, you can write off 2/3, I believe it is, of your state income tax off of your federal tax. So that will be more money kept in the state, which I'm always in favor of. And it will also capture dollars from North Slope flyover workers who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars here and spending it in Hawaii. So yes, broadly speaking, I'm quite in favor. Thank you.
So my constituents, through a number of ways, through a survey, a district-wide survey that I did, going door to door, constituent meetings, have been telling me that the number one priority is to establish an endowment for the permanent fund with a sustainable draw, to continue to reduce expenses, to reduce the net operating loss burden with our credit program, and to phase in broad-based revenue, which includes would include an income tax.
We've talked a lot about how to pay for government here, but the decline in oil prices also has a big impact on the state's overall economy. If elected here in the next session, what are your proposals? What will you do to help diversify the state's economy? Ms. Munoz.
Thank you, James. It's critical that we get a fiscal plan in place. We need to get a sustainable draw established with the permanent fund. Right now, the legislature can draw from the permanent fund earnings reserve with a simple majority vote. We need to be able to put a limit on what that draw can be, because if we don't, eventually the full amount's going to come out of the earnings reserve account and the dividend's going to go away. So I think it critically important is to establish first a permanent fund endowment and put into place revenue measures and reductions in expenses that will put us on a sustainable path. That is my number one priority, and that's what I intend to work on in the next legislature.
Mr. Parrish.
It was the thought that first we need to hit everyone's BFDs, and then we can look at reducing expenses, and then we can look at raising revenues, which resulted in a lot of the gridlock that we saw this past session. That's a big part of why we don't have a financial plan. It's a big part of why 128 failed to pass. So your question, though, was about diversifying the economy. And thank heavens, we are in a great place for that. You know, we were featured in Vogue, I think it was yesterday or today, Southeast Alaska, food destination. And that's fantastic. I have friends who are entrepreneurs in the food business, and it's great to see them thrive. We have a lot of creative people here. Our art economy is blowing up. It's wonderful. We also have enormous potential for renewable energy. We have a lot to offer the world. We're on the front line of climate change, which is actually also an opportunity. Our growing season has gotten longer. Tourism is opening up. Trans-Arctic shipping is going to become a possibility, and he's going to ring the bell at me.
Mr. Guido.
Thank you. I do think we do have a pretty diverse economy in the state of Alaska. We've got tourism, we've got transportation, we've got all kinds of mining, we've got all kinds of things going on. One of the things that we don't have is diversified revenue stream. And so we do need to work on how do we make sure our economy is stable and we're generating revenue to provide state services. We do have, in Southeast Alaska, a wonderful arts economy. We've got all kinds of things going in our favor, and I do think that one of the things that we really need to think about is short term, we need to figure out how to pay for services we have. Long term, we need to figure out how to grow our economy, because we can't grow ourselves into this situation. We need to actually look at the long term and figure out how we're going to grow our economy in the future, addressing our fiscal problem now.
Thank you.
Mr. Parrish, we know that Alaska's healthcare system is broken. What is your plan, or what are some of your ideas to address the high and rising costs of healthcare here?
It's an extremely important question. Did you know that right now in Anchorage, there are many procedures which cost 10 times more to get done in Anchorage than they do in Seattle? That's absurd. That is evidence of a market failure. And that's a place where our government should be effectively advocating on our behalf. It's only part of a much broader problem, which is in the United States, our healthcare costs are out of control. We've got the highest costs in the world, and we've got some of the worst outcomes. We need to look at all of the programs we can. We need to get all of the oars in the water. Part of that will be broadening the pool, trying to come up with agreements with other states to allow us to negotiate more effectively and to bring in other insurers. But, orange card again. I'd be really happy to speak with anyone at length about this subject because it is of profound importance to all Alaskans.
Thank you. Last session, I worked on legislation to bring telemedicine to Alaska. So for the first time, the State Board of Medicine will be licensing doctors from outside of state to provide high-level, highly skilled services, especially out to our rural communities. Everything from psychiatrists to cancer specialists. And the whole range of telemedicine opportunities is going to greatly change the way healthcare is delivered, I believe, in our state, and to help bring the costs down. Another thing in terms of the Medicaid component of our budget, it's one of the fastest growing components of the state's budget. Currently, we're paying over $1 billion a year on Medicaid, which is a state and federal program. We're trying to get more of our recipients of Medicaid to get to a primary care doctor and away from emergency services, which are very costly. And that's another thing that I want to continue to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Parrish?
All right, I'm going to say something unorthodox. Good job. Supporting telemedicine is wonderful, and we have wonderful remote diagnostic tools which are just now becoming available. Did you know that through a camera, now you can take someone's pulse and temperature from across the world? We also need to look at supporting community health workers who have been shown to reduce drastically the amount of emergency room visits that are needed, and those are a major cost for us. There are a lot of exciting options, and I look forward to exploring them with your help, I hope.
Ms. Munoz, this next question is for you first. Are you satisfied with the moves by the Department of Corrections to stop the deaths of prisoners in custody and be more transparent when those incidents do happen?
Well, this is an area that it touches me very personally. A friend of mine who grew up in Juneau was killed in prison in Anchorage last year, and so I think we need to put protections in place that prevent situations from happening. In his case, he should not have been in prison. He had a serious mental condition. He should not have been held, even for a short term. So we need to do a better job, and I fully support the efforts to address this very difficult topic.
Mr. Parrish.
It's an old but true adage that sunlight is the best disinfectant. What we need is greater transparency, and there are a number of tools which are available to us right now, which we should be implementing on a statewide level. Those include things, small reforms like body cams, or moves to community-based policing, which has been proven to have enormously beneficial results for the communities in which it's been implemented. We've seen, as for people in custody being harmed by the police, it's clearly a profound injustice, and we need to bring in concerned groups to help give us their guidance. We need to talk to the members of the communities who have often been targeted or disenfranchised. And have a conversation, sit down with the police, have coffee. I think we can do it, and I think we will.
Mr. Parrish, school funding, of course, is a perennial issue in the legislature and in the local budgets. How do you believe the state should fund its schools?
Generously. There are going to be moves that we can make to improve outcomes. I work at Floyd Ryden Middle School, so I'm very familiar with the grind. I know that my fellow teachers are bringing in snacks for their students because kids don't necessarily have regular meals at home. We need to make sure our kids are fed. I know another teacher who was able to reach out to a salmon hat, a weir, which gave her a bunch of jack salmon because she couldn't afford the classroom supplies to let the students do dissections and have a full experience. And even then, there were crowded 30 people into one small mod. Well, 31 with her, I guess. We have some problems in the state, and we need to listen to our educators, talk to them, stay close to the public schools, and make sure that all of our students have an opportunity to get a high-quality education here.
Thank you. I think I've consistently supported increases in the BSA since 2009, or rather 2007. The funding to public education has increased by approximately $300 million. We still need to do more, though. I sponsored legislation that encourages private investment in our public schools and post-secondary schools. It's a tax credit incentive bill law, and that particular law has resulted in millions of dollars of investment in our university and also in our K-12 programs. Here in Juneau, for instance, Greens Creek made 2 large donations to establish the mine training class at the high school. So we need to kind of think outside of the box. We need to think on innovative ways to fund education to increase support to our schools. I'm also in favor of exploring an educational endowment. This was a concept put forward years ago by Governor Cooper. I think it's one that we need to look at again.
I can't help but to observe that the majority leadership which you have upheld over the years has proven itself a consistent enemy of public education. And that's a problem.
Would you like to rebut?
No.
Oh. This question is for you first, Ms. Munoz. The Alaska Marine Highway is also seeing deep budget cuts, and its fleet is aging, which requires more repair and replacement. What changes would you like to see, and what changes will you try and make to keep that ferry system running?
So specifically to our region, I was instrumental in getting the funding for 2 new Alaska-class ferries, which will be brought online in 2018 and will service the Lynn Canal. One will work the northern Lynn Canal and the other the southern Lynn Canal. Those ferries are being constructed at the Ketchikan shipyard, which has added a lot of investment and economic activity in the Ketchikan area. I think going forward, though, we need to replace our mainliners, and we need, because they're aging, I mean, they go back to the 1960s. I think a transportation bond package is appropriate, and it's something that we can work on with Governor Walker and members of the legislature.
Let me get Mr. Parrish first, and then you, Mr. Pino.
My grandfather retired from the ferry system. He was an engineer. My father met my mother while he was working on the ferry. And now my sister's husband, Rural Nungakat, is working on the ferry. So I guess I must confess to a little bit of bias. I'm a big fan of the ferry service. A study found that for every dollar we put into it, we get about $3 of economic activity generated in the state. And that's not just in Southeast, that's all along the coastal region. So it is absolutely something that we stand to support. And as far as my opponent's support for it goes, I encourage you to ask anyone you know who happens to work on the ferries and ask them what their opinion is.
President Pugh?
Thank you. The marine highway system is critically important for southeast Alaska, for coastal Alaska, for actually the entire state. And one of the things that we do need to do is make sure that we're replacing the vessels when they need to be replaced. As was stated earlier, the vessels are aging. We do have the ability through the Federal Highway Trust Fund to use federal funds to replace many of these vessels because they are our highway system. So we can capitalize on capital funding that's regular source from federal highways to make that happen. What we need to do in looking that direction is making sure we have a mix of classes of vessels that can best serve as many ports as possible. It creates versatility so that we have as few classes of vessels that can serve as many ports as possible, and we don't have so many classes of vessels that they become port specific. So that's going to be very critical for looking to the future.
Can I just add one?
Ms. Munoz,
Can I
yes.
add one? Governor Walker is working closely with the Southeast Conference on different models, management models for the ferry system. One model would structure the ferry system similar to the Alaska Railroad, where we would give assets to the entity to manage in the cash where they could generate revenue from these assets and help to subsidize the marine highway in a more direct way.
First question here, this question to Mr. Parrish. City officials, tribal governments, conservation groups, and others worry that mining in British Columbia will pollute salmon-rich rivers that flow into southeast Alaska. Are their concerns valid, and how should the state respond to that?
I'm very happy to say that there's already excellent work being done in that field. I do believe that it's always valid to be concerned about the fate of our salmon streams, because that is a resource which we've had since antiquity and upon which our people have depended forever. Now there is a tension between resource extraction in the sense of mining and salmon fisheries, and it's folly to ignore that. I do think that our mines here in Juneau have done an excellent job, and I want to commend them for that. As far as the transboundary mines specifically, that is something which we've got to support our tribal government, our national delegation, the Governor Walker's administration in finding equitable solutions that'll leave us with confidence that our salmon waters will be protected.
Ms. Munoz.
Thank you very much. First of all, Lieutenant Governor Byron Malott has done an excellent job in opening up lines of communication between the BC government and the state of Alaska. So first of all, I want to start out with to recognize his efforts. But I think we need to do more. I think we need to raise the oversight of the activities, transboundary activities, to an international gathering. We have an opportunity to request an international joint commission review of all mining activity that would affect downstream, would affect Alaska Southeast. Our congressional delegation has already made this request. I think it's very important that the administration follow with a request to Secretary Kerry for this to happen, and I fully support that.
Ms. Munoz, your opponent tonight has made this an issue somewhat, but there's been a lot of talk from the Alaska Democratic Party that they're interested in creating a coalition, a leadership coalition majority in the House next year. Would you be interested in joining such a coalition if the opportunity arose and the current majority was no longer an option?
So my priority is Juneau. I'm going to join the majority caucus that best represents Juneau, whether it's a coalition government, whether it's Republican-led, but my commitment is to my constituents. So absolutely, I would join a coalition or a bipartisan group or a Republican-led group. But the numbers are still kind of fleshing out right now. But yes, I would.
And Mr. Parrish, to turn that question on its head for you, if you were elected, but the current Republican majority stayed in place, would you be willing to join that majority?
I'd like to quickly observe that the majority to which you've belonged for the last few years has been pretty willing to throw Juneau under the bus. From 2009 to 2015, we had more than 100 state jobs move from Juneau to Anchorage. We had how many tens of millions spent on the Legislative Information Office in Anchorage, and then buying the Wells Fargo building once that lease was declared illegal. But to actually answer your question, it would really depend on the makeup of the majority leadership. If I thought that they were going to be pragmatic, if I thought that they were willing to find fair, ethical solutions for all Alaskans and not continue in the current vein, then yes, I'd be willing to join the majority leadership. However, I'm confident that if you elect me and a few others like me, we will have a pragmatic majority in the state which will be bipartisan.
Ms. Munoz, I assume you
Well,
have.
first of all, it's just not true. I mean, look at all of the great projects that we have gotten funded, that the state capitol renovation, that's a major investment in the community of Juneau and the state capitol. The Fish and Game building in Douglas, the Department of Labor building, the Father Kashavara facility, that's a $135 million project. I mean, we couldn't have done it without the support of the majority. Also, we, just a couple of years ago, made a $3 billion investment into our retirement trust funds, which has helped the retirements of thousands of Alaskans, many in the Juneau area. So I disagree with that comment. Thank you.
And Mr. Parrish, you have a rebuttal as well.
But capital creep is continuing, and the rail belt partisans who have been at the helm and whom you have supported don't seem awfully friendly to Juneau, and I don't expect that to change. Some of the best paying jobs for the state have moved from Juneau to Anchorage, and I don't see that trend changing unless we form a coalition which is not as absolutely dominated by the rail belt.
Can I just respond one time? Just once.
Please keep it to 10 or 15
Sure.
seconds.
I do want to say that the Juneau delegation works very closely together to protect Juneau jobs. Just recently, 6 or 7 months ago, the interim commissioner of the Department of Education was rumored to want to move the department, her office, and many jobs out of Juneau. That would have had a huge negative impact on our community. We got together, we met with the governor, we turned it around, and it's that kind of active action that we take on a regular basis to protect Juneau jobs.
And we do have to move on to the lightning round now. Each candidate, both of you, will be given 15 seconds. Mr. Keto, you do have 2 wild cards yet, so feel free to, if you see a question you do want to entertain. But these questions are all designed to be short answers, easy to answer, although our definition of easy may differ from yours. The first question for both of you, who do you support for president? Ms. Munoz will let you lead up. Yes.
Governor Pence.
And Mr. Parrish.
I supported Senator Sanders, now I'm supporting Secretary Clinton.
Next question, Mr. Parrish, do you support the Juneau Access Project's plans for a road out of Juneau?
Looking at the costs, I don't think it's feasible right now.
Representative Munoz?
Yes, I do support the project.
And then Ms. Munoz, who do you support for Alaska's U.S. Senate race?
Lisa Murkowski.
And Mr. Parrish.
Margaret Stock.
Mr. Parrish, do you support the use of pension obligation bonds to fill as much as $3 billion in unfunded public employee pension liability?
Although it may get us another credit rating downgrade after the 4 that we've already had, I think it could be a useful part of the solution.
Representative Munoz?
No, I do not support debt to pay for debt. Thank you.
Mr. Pito.
I think I'd like to weigh in on this one, and I actually do support the way that the governor has structured the pension obligation bonds that he's looking at, because we do have an opportunity to earn some extra money, up to $1 billion, that can help our future pension obligation. And I do think it's important for us to look at ways, creative ways to try and do that.
And then Ms. Munoz, this next question, you'll get the first opportunity. Do you believe in man-made global climate change?
Yes.
Mr. Parrish?
Yep.
Mr. Parrish, are logging jobs still relevant in Southeast Alaska?
Increasingly. It's really cool. I've got some friends. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be a short answer.
15 seconds.
Okay. Tennecky logging companies coming along. We can do a lot of value-added things here in the state, and I'm really hopeful to see that develop.
Yes, the mills in lower southeast are still operating, but they do need a reliable timber supply. And just recently, the state legislation to establish a state forest does help to get them the timber that they need to continue those operations.
And this is a follow-up question that builds on that one. Do you support state management of the Tongass or portions of the Tongass to increase logging availability, timber availability? Ms. Munoz?
I'm not a fan of large-scale clear-cut logging. I am supportive of more environmentally friendly logging techniques, selective logging, and certainly there are opportunities for value-added development, value-added product to continue to provide jobs in the Alaska economy.
And state management to allow that to happen, state management of a portion of the Tongass.
Well, the state does not manage the Tongass. It manages the state forest.
Yes.
So the question, do we,
If you would support the state taking possession or control, if that was an option of a portion of the Tongass in order to allow logging.
I don't think so. I would have to get more information on that.
And Mr. Parrish?
I think that if we can put professionals in charge of it who will look to our long-term needs, then yes, we can have a sustainable, economically and ecologically sound timber model in Southeast.
Mr. Parrish, do you agree or disagree with the Walker administration's decision to drop the case, essentially challenging the repeal of the Alaska exception that will allow Alaska tribal land to be placed in federal trust?
I think that it's good that he dropped it. I do believe in as much management being at a local level as possible, and I believe in putting tools into the hands of the local tribal authorities.
President Reynolds?
Thank you. The application for tribal trust lands is very complicated, and I know that the local tribe is moving forward on a limited basis with a property here in Juneau, and I do support their efforts to do so.
Mr. Parrish and Ms. Munoz, who should be Speaker of the House, the Alaska House, next year? Ms. Munoz first.
Oh, gosh. That's a tough one. Can I think about that?
Mr. Parrish, would you like to go first then?
There's some people I admire on both sides. I mean, I'm profoundly grateful to Chris Tuck. I think he's a stand-up guy. I also think Paul Seaton, currently a member of the majority and a Republican, has got his head screwed on straight. And I'm really happy to work with whoever manages to stand on top of the writhing pile of bodies. I'm really sorry about that metaphor.
Ms. Munoz.
So I will tell you that there are a number of individuals that are kind of pursuing that possibility to become speaker. Steve Thompson from Fairbanks is thought of very highly, and I think he has an excellent chance. Bryce Edgman has been mentioned. He's a moderate Democrat from Dillingham, a member of the majority caucus. Those are two individuals I think that either one of them would do a good job.
And this isn't on our list, but would you be willing to do it if you were reelected?
That's a big job, but I don't know. I'd have to give it a lot of thought.
I'd ask you the same thing, Mr. Parrish, but because it's a seniority-based job, it'd be difficult.
It's all right. I'm in this for the long haul.
Mr. Parrish, if elected, which committees would you seek to serve on in the next legislature?
Education is absolutely at the top of the list. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there from where we are now, performing at some of the lowest levels in the nation and spending some of the most per capita. Yeah, I think education would be a good start.
Representative Munoz?
You know, I really enjoy serving on finance. So if I was given the opportunity to move up to the co-chair of finance, that would be a position that I would enjoy holding very much.
And Ms. Munoz and Mr. Parrish, has the state dealt with the National Guard sexual assault scandal appropriately and completely at this point? You first, please.
So the last session, we had military justice reform legislation get through. It didn't get a lot of attention, unfortunately, in the media, but it was a major step forward. So, you know, I'm glad that changes are in place that will hopefully prevent a similar occurrence that we saw 2 or 3 years ago.
Mr. Parrish.
We are, thank heavens, seeing cultural changes in the way that we as a society deal with sexual assault. I think that we still have a long way to go, and I'm going to be there on the side of the victim every step of the way, trying to promote justice, fairness, and a fair hearing for all.
Mr. Parrish, do you favor or oppose an essential pay freeze or eliminating funding for step increases for state employees in order to help fill the fiscal gap?
I think that's a really ugly move. It's essentially reneging on contracts, and any contract that's entered into in good faith, I feel we have a clear moral obligation to honor. Before we do something like that, we have got to deal with the contracts, which, maybe more dubious faith, like the agreements that the oil tax structure currently operates under, passed from a lobbyist governor through 2 committees headed up by sitting oil company employees, and passed narrowly with the support of my opponent.
President Munoz?
Negotiated labor agreements are the way to go. I absolutely support the negotiated labor process and do not think it's appropriate for the legislature to intercede.
Thank you very much. Before we open up the floor to questions, we'd like to allow you to have your 2 minutes closing statements to conclude for our broadcast audience. So we'll start, since we started from the last time, we'll start from the right this time, Justin Parrish.
I'm Justin Parrish. I'm running to be your next Statehouse representative. Please vote for me November 8th. We are at a critical moment as a state. If we continue with the leadership that we have, moving in the direction that we've been going, we'll be broke. And that's going to be ugly. If, however, if we get new leadership, if we find a pragmatic, bipartisan coalition, we can really secure a glorious future for our state. You look at the areas for growth, and they're awe-inspiring. You look at the ways that we can support the next rising generation of entrepreneurs, of students, and we can do it right for Alaskans. But we need a change. We need fair deals for the people of our state. We need pragmatic leadership. And we need to make sure that whatever the solutions we come to, and they're going to be complex, they're going to be difficult, we've got to be sure that those solutions put the interests of Alaskans first.
Ms. Munoz.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for coming out tonight. It's been a great discussion, and I'm really pleased to see such a good turnout tonight. So, as I said at the beginning, I focus on 3 areas in my work in the legislature, but I intend to continue to focus on these areas if reelected, and that's really focusing on our economy, Juneau jobs, protecting Juneau jobs, preventing capital move legislation. In the last 8 years, there have been no capital move bills. The year before I was elected, capital move legislation was on the run. I mean, there were hearings, bills were moving out of committee. It was a frightening time for our community, frankly. Because even the introduction, even the passage, the hearing causes a negative ripple effect in our economy. So I've worked really hard to keep that at bay, and that's through good relationships, through supporting legislators on both sides of the aisle, from the Mat-Su, from Fairbanks, from coastal Alaska. And that's what I'm good at. I'm really good at building those relationships for our community. I also will continue to support infrastructure development, our harbors and our transportation system, the improvements that we need to anchor state jobs in Juneau, and most importantly, I will focus on a fiscal plan because it's absolutely critical that we get Alaska on sound fiscal footing moving forward. These are the areas that I commit to working on, and I will continue working on them. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to the moderators and to the hosts.
And Mr. Keating.
Thank you. And I do appreciate everyone listening and everyone here taking an interest in civics in Alaska. And I think it's one of the most important things that we as Alaskans can do is watch what's going on in Juneau, watch what's going on in DC, vote when we have the opportunity to vote. Local elections, municipal, state, and our federal elections. And the reason I'm here and the reason I will continue to be here as long as I feel like there is work to be done is because we have a fiscal situation to resolve. And once that fiscal situation is resolved, we have children to educate. We have our seniors that we need to take care of as people more and more are wanting to age in place instead of going someplace out of Alaska, people that are wanting to be retired and living in their home communities. We need to find ways to try and support that because senior activity is activity that will actually help all of Alaska. So there's there are ways to look at the broad economy of the state of Alaska so that we have the ability to be stable, internal, without dependency on a single resource or a single point of revenue for our state. And that's one of the most important things we can do because that feeds everything else that we want to try and do with the state.
Well, thank you again for everyone who came out tonight. We're going to open it up to questions from the floor. And I believe we'll pass around the microphone, but let me have Andy explain it.